From Life, Law, and Lattes, this is Before Forever, a guided conversation series exploring the questions couples should ask before marriage or long-term commitment. Because strong relationships are built on more than love. They're built through honesty, alignment, and intentional conversation. Now here's your host, attorney, author, and life strategist, Nadia Gilkes.
Hello and welcome to Life, Law, and Lattes and our Before Forever series. I'm your host, Nadia Gilkes, attorney and author of Before Forever. And if you've been listening to our series for the past 5 or 6 weeks or so, we have taken one conversation at a time and talked about a wide range of topics such as religion and past relationships, intimacy, childhood trauma. And as I recorded each one of those episodes, I recognized that there was a recurring theme that weaved through each one of those, and it's boundaries. So I thought it would be perfect to have my first guest on Lifelong Lattes be a boundaries expert. So today we have Sheryl Green. She is the author of You Had Me at No. She's also well known in the Las Vegas speaking community. She is the president of the Las Vegas chapter of the National Speakers Association, and she has an incredible speaking career in her own right. So Sheryl, thank you for joining us as the first guest here on Life, Law, and Lattes.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be the first guest.
It's wonderful because you do such great work. So I was thrilled to have you. So excited when you said yes. As we've talked about in the past, your book title catches my eye immediately. You Had Me at No. So tell me just a little bit about how that book and title came about.
Yeah, so the book came about really after 40 plus years of not setting boundaries and not even knowing what boundaries were. And ironically, because you just got to announce me as the president of the National Speakers Association, I would not be on this path if it weren't for NSA. Because years ago, I was just recovering from burnout. I had burned out epically, if I might say so myself, at an animal rescue, running my own business, taking care of, aging parents. I was doing all the things. And I hit my brick wall, was starting to come back. I was starting to feel like myself again and be able to function and be able to, say a sentence without crying, just the little things in life. And a friend of mine asked me to be the incoming president. And I sat there like immediately I knew it was a bad idea. I just knew it was a bad idea. But I had the angel and the devil on each shoulder. And, one was going like, well, everything you've gotten because of networking and because of service and, volunteering. And then on the other shoulder was are you out of your damn mind? Like you literally just escaped burnout by the skin of your teeth. This is a terrible plan. Like, no. And unfortunately, I listened to the wrong one. And I actually said yes to her. After a few weeks of, deliberation and speaking with mentors and friends, I said yes. And the moment I did it, every cell in my body was just like, what are you doing? Like, you're crazy. And thankfully, I spoke to another mentor and he told me it wasn't too late to say no. He said that it wouldn't be bad to back out at that point. What would be bad would be to go through all the training to prepare for it for a year, because it's really like a 2-year commitment.
Oh, okay.
And then back out and take that spot from someone else. He said that would be the problem. So that's how the book came about. Is I was making this decision, and a friend of mine sent me an article on boundaries. And I was like, well, this is a novel concept. Like, what is this? And, I read that article, and then I had this big decision to make. And I just came to the point where I realized probably wasn't the only person that was struggling with boundaries. And since I learned through writing and through research, why don't I just go ahead and write a book about it? And I'll bring up, anybody along on that journey that wants to join me. And that's where the book came from. The title was probably the hardest part of it. Up until the very last moment, this book was, you're sitting, right? Because the excitement here is going to be big. The book was titled Intentional Decision Making.
Ooh.
Thankfully, I was sitting in another NSA meeting and the speaker was talking about like creativity, and we had even tried brainstorming the title and we couldn't come up with anything as an entire chapter. And then she kept going with her presentation and it literally, I divine download, whatever you wanna call it popped into my head, "You had me at no," and I just started texting people in the room, and you just saw, like, the little ding and the heads go up as people were like, and everybody looked at me and they're like, "Yes!"
Perfect.
I love it, and I, like, feel like I knocked it so out of the park that now I'm afraid to name the next one.
Oh, well, that divine download will always come.
I'm waiting,
What
I'm
it's
waiting.
supposed to be, it will be perfect.
Yes, I'm waiting for the download.
Now, you've said you did a lot of research, you had your own personal experiences. When the average person, which you may have found already, when they hear the word boundaries, they think putting a wall up, pushing people back, distance. How do you define boundaries?
So I've used different definitions throughout this journey, but the one that I'm loving right now is the distance at which I can serve you and me simultaneously.
Hmm, I like that.
And it's really just that we're here to serve one another and we can't do that if we don't take care of ourselves.
And I think the crux of setting boundaries or having this project, so to speak, is because a lot of people have a hard time saying no and setting boundaries in their own life. Why do you think that is? What are some reasons? Because I'm sure there's not just one.
No, there's quite a few, and I'm not gonna throw parents under the bus here. That's not my intention with this statement. But what I am gonna say is, if you grew up in a home where boundaries weren't, they weren't taught, they weren't modeled, sometimes they weren't accepted, then you can't just expect to wake up one day and magically you can set healthy boundaries. And the reason I say I'm not trying to throw parents under the bus here is because most people haven't learned how. And you can't expect your parents to teach you something that they themselves have never learned. So, I think that's the biggest reason is just we haven't been taught that we can, how to, that it's all right. The other side of that I think is kind of prehistoric. And I think, we're still operating from that lizard brain that kept us safe in this tribal society. If somebody wasn't watching our back, we're gonna get cast out of the tribe and nobody's gonna be watching us and we're gonna get eaten by like a snacky saber-toothed tiger. So we're still operating from that brain. And um yeah, we're not too afraid of being eaten these days, but that translates to I'm going to lose my friend, I'm going to lose my relationship, I'm going to lose my job. So that primal fear is still locked in there and we have to bypass it in order to make intentional decisions, truthfully.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into this series, which has been all about couples. And sometimes people can be resistant to setting boundaries for the reasons that you said. I might lose my relationship. So, how can people go about setting boundaries and still not having conflict, but instead making it a healthier relationship?
Yeah. So that's a very broad question. So I'm gonna answer a very little part of it. And
Mhm.
that is um if you are with the right person and you are with a person that loves and respects you and cares about you, they are going to want you to have boundaries. And I hear this all the time, and most people are joking. But I'll talk to, a man or a woman, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, no, my partner really needs healthy boundaries. They really need to be able to say no. Not to me, but to everyone else." And most of the time I think they're joking. But
Probably not.
I but I think that's really like the very just baseline concept that we have to get into our heads is if you are with someone that doesn't want you to have boundaries, that wants you to be a yes man or woman, people pleaser, beck and call, like can't stand up for themselves. If you're with somebody who wants you to be that, this is the back up because you're with the wrong person. So that's the first thing I would say is really look for that person and make sure that you're I call them significant otters. So make sure that your significant otter wants you to have boundaries and is happy and proud of you for having boundaries because that's the first dead giveaway that you're just in the wrong place.
I love that. That's great advice. One of the first conversations that I went through was childhood trauma, and
How long do
no
we
one
have?
expects to
How long do we have?
we won't go through everything, but a lot of people are walking around with trauma that is still showing up in their adult life. And in a relationship, you're not expected to go through every hurt and wound, but there are some things that your partner needs to know so that you can have a healthy relationship. What are your suggestions on navigating that type of conversation where there are some things that you do need to say so that people know what your triggers are or what your pain points are, but you're also reserving the most intimate details of whatever may have happened to you so that you're preserving your privacy as well?
Yeah. So I would say, look, that everything is going to be different for every couple, for sure. Um, but I think there are like layers to the onion, and I think early on in the relationship, you kind of have to accept if someone just says this is off limits, you have to kind of just sit with that and say, okay. And hopefully at some point in the relationship, you're going to be comfortable enough to tell me why that is. And I'll give you an example of that when my husband and I started dating, and just fair warning, we moved fast. And I've never moved this fast with anybody or anything in my life. Like I've taken longer to buy cars. So I'm just giving that little heads up. But when we started dating, playful, we're out in public, and he like smacked my butt in public. Now, I'm not saying that that's not okay for some people. I'm saying that I have childhood trauma that's attached to that. And I had to say to him, it had actually taken me several years and multiple relationships to know why I had childhood trauma around that. But I said to him when we first started dating, the first time he did that, I said, "Don't ever do that to me in public." And he kind of, he stopped because I was probably rather pointed when I said it. Um, but he respected that. And he was like, he just said, okay. And he stopped doing it. He never did that again. But later on, as we started opening up more and more to each other, and he started learning more about my childhood, like then I was able to tell him, okay, by the way, that thing that you probably thought I was a weirdo for, like there's a good reason for that. So I think in the beginning, it's giving the other person grace and accepting that sometimes something is just off limits, and saying that's not okay or that's a trigger for me needs to be enough.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think it's really helpful when you know that it's a trigger for you and why.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think it's really helpful, like you mentioned, the first time it happened, you said something versus letting someone get 2 years down the line, and then you're like, it really bothers me when," and they're like, "Well, what changed?" Nothing changed, you just never said anything. There's a difference. So, I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's actually really funny that you say that because I just had that with my stepson. So my husband has 2 adult children, and the older one, he's always called me by a shortened version of my name as a nickname, and it's the same nickname that someone in my past used. And I this weekend, this past week, we were out there, we were in California visiting, and he called me that name, and I was like, "By the way." And he was like, "I've been calling you that for over 2 years, like, I mean, literally, probably 4 years." And I was like, "Yes, but now I realize that it bothers me. So, please don't." And he's, I mean, been respectful as much as he can in this short period of time. So, but yeah, just funny that you said that.
I love that. That's so funny because I'm definitely one of those people where how I meet you is how you stay for a very long time in my mind. And so it can get very hard to rework that. So
Yes.
I get both sides of that. Another topic that had a lot of conversation, it always has a lot of conversation, is the boundaries around your ex within your new relationship. Now, it's one thing if you have children with an ex, so you have to talk to them about the children. But then when you don't have children, but we split amicably and we're just great friends still, and people trying to navigate that landmine, any particular advice on how to nurture those boundaries? Set
I
them
wish
up.
my husband were here to answer this question with me because this was a big sticking point at the beginning of our relationship. Because as I had mentioned, we moved rather quickly.
How
And
quickly was the quickly? Because everybody's gonna wanna know now. From the time you met to the "I do."
okay, so time we met to time we dated was over a year. So
Okay.
that one doesn't necessarily count. But our first date was on January 29th. On March 1st, he bought a house closer to me.
Wow.
And I think he closed on April 1st, and I never stayed at my own house again after that, and we got engaged in June.
Wow.
So,
Like a
as I said,
Cinderella princess story.
you know what? It's one of those, like, we've all been we've both been through the bad relationships, and when we
Mhm.
got to the right person, it was like, "Okay, let's do this." But yes, I always have to say that ahead of time, but had we had a longer courtship period, normal courtship period, I would imagine that those exes would have I would have just ditched them.
Mhm.
But I've always prided myself on staying friends with my exes and having good relationships with them. And I had 2 that were actually pretty close, one I saw regularly and one I talked to regularly, and, he was not okay with that,
Mm. Yeah.
understandably.
Yeah.
So I will say when it comes to that, some people are fine.
Mhm.
Some significant others have, no problem with that. Some do. Some have maybe, trauma around that with a past relationship, whatever it may be. But it was conversations, and it was talking about it, and ultimately, he asked me, "What are you getting holding on to these relationships?"
That's a good question.
It was an excellent question, and, when I realized that there was truly no benefit and it was harming my future with him, um, I got on the phone with both of them and I said, "I wish you the best. This has nothing to do with you. I just need to focus on my relationship."
Oh,
Um,
got it.
so, it's different for everyone,
Mhm.
and like every boundary, this is going to be unique to your situation, and it's going to be about communication and saying, I'm not comfortable with this, or I'm fine with this, but I'm not okay with this. And having enough respect for that other person that you can say, okay, I'm all right with this. This is more important to me than this past that I'm dragging along with me. Um, that being said, I am glad that you brought up having children together, because it is not fair to expect someone to not have access to their ex or contact with their ex when there's children and grandchildren and lives, just
Yeah, I think the problem comes with where is the line? What are you talking about? Are you still talking like your besties? Or are you just talking about the kids? If every time they call and say, she's coughing and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're running over, I think that's where it starts to get a little blurry. And can the new spouse come, or does the new spouse have to stay home? All of that starts to come into play. And so I think, like you said, it's communication. What are you
always.
getting from it? What's this about? Where do I fit into the picture if this other person is still going to remain in the picture? And that's something that doesn't always get fleshed out. So, the next topic, which is not as easy to do a hard cut, but what I always say is who's sitting at your marital table? The in laws. Often the extended family, the aunts and uncles who are like a mom and dad, and they feel like they have a say in how your household runs or how you spend your money or what this person can do. Setting up boundaries with extended family.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime I think about this, I always think about my big fat Greek wedding
Yes.
where everybody is just up in everybody's business. So, there's a few things around this. I think one, while I am never advocating for not having someone to talk to about your relationship. Okay, you should always have someone to talk to about your relationship. Therapists are lovely. However, you have to keep in mind that depending on what you share with a parent, with a sibling, um, you could potentially be kind of poisoning the well. So if you do share something that maybe you went through a rough patch and things were difficult, somebody did something maybe that wasn't so great, um, but you're choosing to work through it, and you're choosing to work through it, you might have some pushback from people that don't agree with you. Okay. Um, I feel like I just have to say this. I don't know why I have to say this. I'm never like violence completely out the window. Like we are
Right.
not talking about that. Like by all means, go to your family, tell them, and get the hell out of there. But I think it's just you do need to be careful how much you share with a close family member like that. I think that's one of the things, and again, you should have someone. There's
Mhm.
gotta be a friend or a therapist or someone that you can talk to and bounce ideas off of, but, I think it's really important to keep that relationship really sacred and really private. Um, the other side of it is, as someone who finds it, who has found it difficult to set boundaries, sometimes your significant other is going to have a really difficult time setting boundaries with their family. And I think it's important that if possible, the family, the that person is the one that sets the boundaries. However, if they can't do it, then it's time for your partner to step up and do it. Um, I hope that made sense. I feel like I needed a diagram or something. Um,
Well, no, I get
but
it. Like, you should talk to your mom and dad. I should talk to my mom and dad. But if you just
thank
don't have
you.
a backbone, I'm gonna have to say something, but you might wanna say it before I do, because 'cause I'm not gonna nurture.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes. Could not have and did not say that better myself. Um, so I think that's really important is that, like, if my parents are the ones being the difficult and trying to um kind of weasel their way into business that they shouldn't, I should be the one to step up and say something. If I can't, then my partner needs to be able to do it. And I really can't be angry at them for doing that.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to what you first said at the beginning. If you were raised in the household and boundaries were never discussed, allowed, it doesn't matter how old you get, the parent child dynamic never seems to change. Like your parents could be 80 and you could be 60, but you kind of see them when they're 40 and they see you when you're 5. Like, and so it doesn't grow just because you turned 18 and had kids and got married either. So that's really, really difficult to, I don't know, it sounds like family therapy.
Yeah.
At least 1 or 2 sessions. Like we're gonna have to mature this relationship.
Yeah, and I think part of it is having, again, having the discussion with your partner. Okay, what are we accepting? What are we not accepting? And then showing that unified front.
Yeah.
Not just like, oh, well, my husband doesn't want me telling you this, so I can't
Right.
tell you. That's not gonna be good for anyone. But coming to them and saying, that's we're not okay with that.
Mhm.
And you know what? I'm a huge fan of boundary buddies and having somebody that you can bounce ideas off of, that you can practice with. Your spouse should be your boundary buddy. You should be practicing these conversations. If you're like, man, I got to call my mom and tell her we're not coming to Thanksgiving. Like this year we decided to do it at our house. Like, have the conversation, practice it, role play. Let him throw all the guilt and everything that is coming. Let them throw that at you and practice and get comfortable having that conversation. Um so yeah, I think it just, again, it's communication, it's being on that same page and then presenting that unified front to anyone outside of the the marital unit.
I love that because that's actually one of the exercises in my book, and I know you don't even have it yet. So that's
Let me
just
point it
lets me
out.
know that I'm right on point because it's a conversation practice. It's we really appreciate this, but we have decided that what works best for us is this, and then you practice filling in those blanks for yourself and being united. I wanted to piggyback on the first part of this family conversation when you were saying what you share with your family and being mindful. I think what people forget is that, because sometimes people get to their breaking point. Sometimes that can come 7 or 8 times. So maybe the first or second time you're like, I'm leaving him, we're done, da da da. And you've rattled off all the negative. And that's what your family or friends are rolling around with in their head, like all this negative because you've never said a redeeming quality. And I'm leaving him and we're done. And then here comes Thanksgiving and here he comes. And they're like, because they're still stuck in. So if you're going to make your family that person you're bouncing things off, bounce some positives too, because he may come back in the picture and then they still have to be around him thinking all this bad stuff. Or like in I'm always looking at like, are you still I mean, if they're the mother of your niece or nephew, they're always going to be around, or whatever. So I think people have to be mindful, like, this is family, whether a piece of paper says you're related or not. This is family. So we have to navigate this differently. So just in a general relationship sense, what are some early warning signs that a couple may have unhealthy boundaries with each other?
Oh, it's a great question. Oof. Okay, I'm thinking. Hold on.
Okay.
Well, I will share some examples from my island of misfit boys, that I call my dating history. I know that, I dated a guy who he thought it was completely okay to have women sitting on his lap, like hugging and, kissing his cheek at the bar. Now, again, this is an individual thing. he thought that was okay. I'm sure there are women out there that's okay for them. That was not okay for me. So when you have those like icky feelings, that's the best way I
That's the
what
thing
the
now. What's
do it.
my ick?
When you're sitting there and you're just like, "Ooh, I don't like how I feel. I don't we're going home at the end of the night or whatever after the fact and I'm like, ugh. I'm just I icky. That's the best I've got right now. Sorry. Yeah, author and speaker. And I'm like, it's icky. Um when you have that, I think that's your sign that you need to set a boundary. I think when the red flags pop up is when you set the boundary and the other person either doesn't listen, doesn't respect it, doesn't follow it, or mocks you for it, or tells you like that's not a big deal. You're making a huge deal out of this, out of nothing. Um,
Gaslighting.
yeah, I and I'm hesitant. I'm always hesitant to use like popular words now
Right.
because such a thing. Like, no, he just said no to you. Like he's not gaslighting. Like, calm down. But no, when really that like, oh, stop making such a big deal. Like that is a big deal. That
Yeah.
that response right
If
there.
I felt it and I brought it to you, don't minimize me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, just the when you don't respect a boundary, you don't respect the person.
Yeah. And for the people out there who never had to set boundaries or they don't have experience setting boundaries, where do they start?
With my book, uh,
Which is right behind you.
behind me, it is available on Amazon. You had me at no. Um, but really, the first step is going to be pausing. And I know that sounds silly and like what I'm trying to set a boundary here, not like find my inner peace. But that pause, we talked about being in the lizard brain and having that fear response. That pause is what allows us to get out of the lizard brain and into our actual thinking, intellectual, intentional brain. Um, and you cannot set a boundary. You cannot make a healthy decision. You cannot do any of those things if you are running from a saber-toothed tiger. So that's the absolute first step is take that pause, give yourself a moment to get out of it. And the other thing, obviously, this is a multiple step process, but the other thing I'll say is start small, folks. Okay. We don't go into the gym and pick up 400 pounds to squat. And we're not going to go, I'm going to set boundaries now and go directly to our moms. Okay. Or directly to our bosses. All right. We're going to start with the little boundaries, with the low stakes boundaries.
Starbucks. I didn't want the whipped cream.
Yes.
Can you do
Yes.
this over? Because this is not what I ordered.
Exactly. Like,
Speaking up for yourself.
yes. Like, excuse me, massage therapist, you're using a little bit too much pressure. Okay, that's where you start, and that's where we build those muscles. Yeah, don't walk right into your mom and start. That's doesn't end well. I can speak from experience when I say that doesn't end well.
So, as we start to bring this to a close, I want to do a quick little lightning round with you just to fill in the blank.
Okay.
Healthy boundaries are.
Self-sustaining and relationship saving.
Mm, I like that. One thing every engaged couple should understand about boundaries is.
That they need to establish them early and they can still establish them later if they haven't. but it's
I like
best in the beginning.
it's not a one time set it and forget it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you need to reflect back frequently and set new ones as things come up, because you're not gonna sit down with a guidebook, with 40
This
pages
is
in
what life is going to bring you.
it. Exactly.
As much as we wish we had that. And for you personally, what boundary you have become better at setting as you've gotten older is?
All the boundaries. This isn't gonna be lightning. Hold on, I gotta think. Um, you know, I'm putting up with less BS.
Mm.
And that is the boundary journey, that is perimenopause. That is all the things converging in my 40s. But I think I'm just less tolerant of being mistreated. And I'm finally speaking up, and I'm not afraid to lose friends over it. Because again, if they don't respect the boundary, they don't
Yes.
respect you.
Were they ever really friends? Yeah. And one conversation every engaged couple should have before marriage is.
But they speak to each other.
Mm.
They speak to each other. Some people come from families where screaming and raising their voice and even cursing at one another was acceptable, and some people don't. And I think finding that healthy, this is how we get to talk to each other, and we can disagree and we can argue, but ultimately we need to do so with this respect, whatever that is to you. Again, that's going to change with every relationship.
I love that. Communication styles are so important. Now, before we let you go, I do want to make sure that people know how to get in touch with you and the types of projects that you are taking on. So I know your website is Sheryl Green Speaks. Anything else you'd like to know? Social media, more books?
You can find everything on my website, SherylGreenSpeaks.com. There's a free download for you, how to say no cheat sheet, which comes really in handy. You can find links to my books on there as well. You can work with me. I work with businesses, employee resource groups, teams, nonprofits, keynote events. I love speaking. I love workshops, and I love the sigh of relief that I see from attendees when they realize that it's actually okay to set boundaries, and it's actually going to make it better for them and everyone around them.
I love it. Perfect. I knew that you would be the perfect person to tie a bow on the first half of this series. And I hope that the people listening really understood that boundaries are not a wall or a way to push people away, but it really is your safe spot in the relationship where you have clarity, you know what each other expects, what their triggers may be, or what their parameters in the relationship are. And it really is a way to drive communication and make the relationship stronger. So I think you highlighted that perfectly with your own examples. May we all have a Cinderella story like you did, although I probably do need a year or two. Um, I don't think I could move that quickly, but may we all have our own version of a Cinderella story. And then when we get there, we can nurture our relationship with boundaries and communication and clarity. So thank you all for listening today. Thank you, Sheryl, for being here. So appreciate you. And until next time, lead with honesty and love with intention.
You've been listening to Before Forever, a guided conversation series from Life, Law, and Lattes. Download the free Before Forever Reflection Workbook at illegalcafe.com/resources. And until next time, keep asking the questions that matter.